Okay, so shipping. Obviously, if it's shipping like fictional characters, I don't think there's really any issues. I mean, they are fictional, but there are a lot more implications when it comes to real people shipping. And in today's video, we're going to talk particularly about same-sex shipping relating to members of the same band, which I know sounds extremely niche, but it's actually a huge practice that's been occurring for decades. We're going to touch on issues like queerbaiting, pink capitalism, the fetishization of same-sex relationships, the perpetuation of heteronormativity in fanfiction, how shipping might affect group dynamics, and we're going to be exploring all of that as it relates to the Larry fandom and K-pop idol shipping culture specifically. So yeah, let's get into it.
I was 18 and absolutely not trying to come out to the public. People thought Camila and I were like into each other. And that made me so uncomfortable, like disgustingly uncomfortable, because I was queer, but she was not. And it made me feel like a predator, essentially, because
It's invasive.
it made me feel like a predator because of the type of clips people would put together and the type of stories people would write and the type of stuff. I was always the aggressor and I was always the one turning her, and I was always the one who was like the masculine energy in the scenario, and it made me very uncomfortable because that's not how I identify.
Yeah, the fans make... originally I saw that they were making these little fan flicks, which is where they make...
Fan fiction.
Yeah. But then it turned into so many people genuinely thinking me and Harry are in a relationship.
When the term boyband fan comes to mind, it likely conjures up a very specific image. Over the years, boyband fans have often been portrayed as obsessive, enamored, juvenile, passive consumers of a male heterosexual product. And consequently, the label of boyband fan often carries with it a very strong feminine connotation, with such fandoms being mostly regarded as being girl spaces. But there's something very interesting about the likes of the Larry and Taekook fandoms. They too have been subject to media construction of them as boy-crazy fangirls, just like all of the boyband fans that have preceded them. But what happens when the fangirl is boy crazy, but not in a straight way? There are so many implications here, and we're gonna unpack all of them. Also, please note that I have been using the term fangirl because, like I explained, the media tends to associate a feminine image to boyband fans. However, I want to acknowledge that boyband fans encompass all genders, despite the stereotypical portrayal, and that I'm strictly using the term fangirl here because of its historical usage, and not because it's accurately representative. Returning to the likes of Larry and Taekook, the first implication we have here is the fact that the object of fan focus is a couple, which disrupts the monoamorousness typically imagined between a fan and their object of desire. Usually, we imagine a fangirl as being singularly devoted to one person, and imagining themselves romantically with that one person in particular. But in these situations, the object of fan desire is a couple, and one that they're not even a part of, which is very interesting. Moreover, as you surely know, these ships have huge fandoms, and as such, the nature of the desire surpasses individual longing, and the desire is shared. The desire is not simply between one fan and one object, but rather it is cultivated and fostered by thousands of fans, forming a communal queer desire. And adding one more layer of complexity to it, it is a communal desire specifically for the queer desire of others. This is so interesting because not only is it contradictory to the typical notion of the fangirl desire, which has always mostly been understood in heterosexual terms, but it is also conflicting with traditional understandings of how queer communities form. In fact, usually, queer communities are created on the foundation of individual queer identification, which means that the individuals who make up the community identify as queer. However, in the case of such fandoms, many of the fans are straight, yet they still foster a kind of queer-adjacent community, which I find really interesting. Hannah McCain explained this perfectly in their essay entitled Boy Crazy But Not in a Straight Way, The Truth About Larry, which I'm sorry, but that is a phenomenal title. But anyways, they wrote that, and I quote, "The queer community of the Larrys is not determined by individual identity politics that start from a place of I identify as X, but rather, queerness is found through a shared solidarity that strives for the queer desires of others to be made possible and real, for the celebration of the queerness of others rather than oneself." Something that I think about sometimes is that when it comes to these big ships, like there is no doubt that the management teams for these groups are aware, and if the management is savvy in the slightest, they'll understand the commercial power that such a ship holds, and they'll capitalize on it. And on a business side, it's very smart. The management sees the fervor surrounding the ship in question, will foster it, maybe influence the members to play into it a bit, ultimately resulting in more publicity and more money for the management. And this works. Let's take Larry for example. Like, this ship was so huge in its heyday. Wattpad, Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, Merch, like you name it. And a lot of people actually became Larrys before becoming fans of One Direction. And thus, Larry kind of acted as a marketing campaign for the band, attracting a bunch of new fans and making them more money. And we know this. Narratives centering on queer relationships will attract new fans and will create a fresh consumer market. It's the whole concept of pink capitalism. Queer markets being targeted for profit via the commercialization and exploitation of queer identities and cultures. And while this proves the influence and commercial power of the LGBTQ community, it also raises a big red flag on authenticity and ethics. How do we know that the moments that we are seeing as fans are genuine as opposed to being fabricated by the management team? Maybe the individuals in questions are forced or encouraged to comply with behaviors that don't resonate with them by their management. Fan service in K-pop exemplifies this perfectly, and we're going to talk about that more later. The notion of pink capitalism goes hand in hand with queerbaiting, a notion that is very recurrent in discussions like this one. The term queerbaiting refers to instances when fictional characters contain hints of queer subtext, such as the inclusion of romantic themes and storylines that tease at queerness in a manner that resonates with LGBTQ audiences, only to ultimately reinforce the heteronormative status quo. Queerbaiting is kind of a tricky term to use when applied to real people, though, since queerbaiting implies exploiting LGBTQ fans for monetary gain, and we can't always know if someone is actually doing that or just using their natural self-expression. Let's take Kit Connor, for example. He received many accusations of queerbaiting, which made him feel forced to come out as bisexual, which is why we must be very careful when applying this term to real people. Although that doesn't mean that celebrities should be absolved from scrutiny when they are engaging in what may appear as performative gestures without any engagement or acknowledgement of LGBTQ communities. However, like we talked about, there are also potential risks with the label of queerbaiting. Honestly, it's kind of a tricky situation, and I don't really know 100% where to stand on this, because obviously a straight person appropriating queer culture for money is icky, but on the other hand, if that person isn't actually straight and feels forced to come out because of queerbaiting accusations, that's obviously bad too. Please let me know what you think about the term queerbaiting when it relates to real people in the comments, because I'd really like to know your thoughts. One thing is certain though, and that is that debating the sexuality of these celebrities is intrusive and shouldn't be normalized. If they are actually queer, then they should come out when they are ready, and if they even want to come out in the first place. And similarly, if they are straight and tell you that they are straight, then we should accept that and respect that. Like Emily Roach wrote in their essay entitled The Homoerotics of the Boyband, Queerbaiting, and RPF in Pop Music Fandoms, discerning celebrity intent becomes even more challenging when it comes to the highly personal matter of sexuality. Countless examples of closeting within the music industry means that even when celebrities are explicit about their heterosexuality, there are fans who read denials of queerness as fabricated, management-controlled evidence of closeting. I also think that it's worth thinking about the real-life partner that these celebs might have and the hardships that they might endure due to these shipping practices. Let's take Eleanor Calder, for example, who was dating Larry Tomlinson during the peak of the Larry ship. The amount of hate that she received, I can imagine that it must have been really hard for her, and I'm sure that it must have been difficult for their relationship too. I feel like there can be a disconnect when you're part of such a big community of people who all believe in uncovering this big hidden truth and proving it for themselves. I kinda understand why people outside of these bubbles often refer to such behaviors from fans as conspiracy theory thinking, because there is a very strong feeling of collective witnessing that is central to such a community. This claim to the truth and this feeling of we have witnessed something and we must uncover it should not be underestimated, and I feel like sometimes these fandoms have a semblance of that. And I really get how these communities grow to such big numbers, because these fans are dedicated and like amazing researchers, and their theories can be very convincing. Also, the confidence that they exude that they are right can be very contagious. Plus, the more time a person invests in believing and advocating for something, the more resistant they will become to giving it up. But these fandoms aren't all bad. For one, it creates a real sense of community. The fans are bound by a common purpose, and they can kind of operate as an emotional collective of sorts, creating connections and fostering an environment of kindness, support, and belonging. Anyone that's been deep in a fandom before will know what I'm talking about. There truly is a sense of camaraderie, and I know that a lot of these fandoms are often painted in a negative light, but we shouldn't undermine the positive emotional and mental effects that such communities might bring to people. Okay, so now let's take a little history ride and explore the origins of queer K-pop shipping. So, modern K-pop culture emerged in the early 1990s, a time when South Korea's entertainment industry was undergoing serious serious reforms as a result to the country's democratization and the subsequent relative liberalization of its popular culture. And from the very start of K-pop, shipping idols together was prevalent, particularly male idol pairings. Scholars speculate that South Korean women's interest in male homoeroticism during the 1990s can be attributed to the gradual dismantling of nationalist protectionism in the country's media landscape, which notably introduced Japanese boy love manga comics to South Korea. And this opening up to Japan exposed South Korea to boy love mangas at the same time as K-pop entertainment companies began producing boy bands. And unsurprisingly, the two fandoms kind of merged, giving birth to the modern K-pop idol shipping practices that we know today. According to Tamabod's.net, who wrote an amazing essay on K-pop idol shipping culture within the heteronormative social context of South Korea, where expressions of same-sex desire are socially censored, the importation of Japanese popular culture queered young women's viewing habits, introducing a queer gaze that celebrated radical sexual expression and continues to challenge the conservative gender ideologies of the society. South Korea is also a historically patriarchal society, and women's agency to express sexual desire has long been suppressed. In the essay I read, Bodesnet argued that at that time, shipping kind of represented a radical feminist act because it allowed female admirers of K-pop idols to actively explore and articulate their attraction, offering an outlet for the expression of desires that were usually silenced. I read a study on why some heterosexual women are drawn to male-slash-male relationships, and it suggested that some women preferred to exclude themselves from sexual fantasies in order to unconsciously overturn the male gaze, and all the while appreciating the male body. That's what the study said. What they meant by that is that since the male body has never been politicized in the same way that the female body has, sexualized depictions of queer men are sometimes easier for women to consume as opposed to sexualized depictions including women. I think that the study had some valid points, but on the other hand, I do feel like that might further contribute to the sexualization of queer male relationships, which is obviously problematic. But anyways, I kinda went on a little tangent, but the point is that K-pop companies had recognized the power of the heterosexual woman fanbase, and they started targeting and catering to young female consumers, meticulously sculpting the public personas of their idols, notoriously imposing dating bans, and controlling media narratives to ensure that their idols remain single, or at least appear to be single, and thus potentially available as objects of romantic investment for their fanbase. Hey, sorry, if you haven't noticed, I just changed rooms because the lighting is way better here, so. Anyways, talking about K-pop companies and shipping, I'm not sure if you knew this, but apparently in 2006, SM Entertainment, which is one of the biggest K-pop companies, it has represented the likes of Girls' Generation, Red Velvet, aespa. Well, anyways, in 2006 they created a fanfiction contest, where the fans would write romantic fanfictions shipping the members of the band. And I even think that the winner would be given like a financial prize, a personal fan meet with the idols, signed CDs, and their fanfic would even be read out loud. Like imagine listening to a fanfiction about you and your bandmate. Anyways, I thought that was funny, but it's also an example of how K-pop companies can use shipping as marketing. And something crucial to these companies is that queer shipping kind of exists in a safe zone of plausible deniability. Sorry. It's never directly addressed, but there is a strategic deniability that allows it to be palatable and dismissible to conservative society, all the while remaining suggestive enough to draw people in. And if it is addressed by conservative society, it can be viewed as a sort of gay for pay dynamic, which makes it acceptable because it's a performance. This inadvertently plays a role in overshadowing and delegitimizing actual queer idols within the K-pop industry. Because why would you support actual queer idols when you can indulge in your queer fantasies from a straight source? The practice is also divisive amongst queer Korean fans, with some viewing it as verging on the territory of queerbaiting. Understandably, they disapprove of idols costuming queerness for profit, and gaining adoration from it, mind you, all the while real everyday queer Koreans might face a lot of real issues from it. In this sense, it can be viewed as a sort of hypocrisy from an industry that rejects and neglects to acknowledge the existence of queer communities, but nonetheless will exploit them for profit. On the other hand, there are some queer Korean fans who view queer idol shipping as representation, even if it is completely performative. With so little queer representation in their media landscape historically, some fans might feel like at least it's something, which is a sentiment that isn't as observed in Western fans, seeing that we are years ahead in the amount of queer representation that we have in our media. And like we talked about previously, it's highly speculated that a lot of these K-pop companies might encourage, or even mandate that their idols play up the homoeroticism. And this raises an ethical concern, where we can't be truly certain if an idol's behavior on stage, in interviews, or on social media is by their own will or is constructed by management. This brings up the concept of fan service in K-pop. You might have seen some of these uncomfortable fan calls where idols are asked to do super questionable things by fans.
Call me mommy again. Mommy.
Mommy?
In your cute time. Mommy.
Mommy?
Call me mommy.
Mom?
Mom.
So I'm your mom? I'm your son?
Yes.
Wow.
Call me mommy again, okay?
Okay, hi, mommy.
All this to say that idols will go a long way to please their fans, and the idea that they might be playing up these ships for their fans isn't too far-fetched. And if you're familiar with K-pop fandoms, you know that these shippers can kind of create any narrative they want out of thin air. If two idols touch or interact or even just breathe in the same direction, it's love. These fans are very imaginative. They can take like pretty much any interaction and just slow it down, add some romantic music in the background, maybe a filter, and bam. Also, I feel like the enforced gender segregation in K-pop might be a factor in how prevalent queer ships are. Let's take previous K-pop generations, like second gen or third gen for instance, where male-female idol interactions were slightly more common. A lot of the time you'd see that when an idol would interact with an idol of the opposite gender, even if it was just like 30-second at an award show, they would automatically get shipped together, which kind of shows how uncommon male-female interactions are in K-pop. And if you have no male-female K-pop idol interactions, you can't really create ships out of nothing, although some people do try. So one alternative might be shipping members of the same group. And in a sense, I feel like a lot of fangirls might prefer imagining their favorite idols in a same-sex relationship, rather than being in a relationship with an idol of the opposite gender. Because in that way, they can still kind of hold on to a semblance of delusion and imagine themselves being in a relationship with their bias without feeling jealous. I saw a comment on a Reddit post that talked about exactly that, and I'm gonna read it for you. The commenter said, and I quote, "A lot of fans seem to support idols being gay in hypothetical scenario sort of way. Like, they're gay, but only because they haven't met me yet. Or, they're gay, but only because that allows me to imagine them in romantic or sexual situations without feeling jealous, since I don't see same-sex relationships as real or as competition." And obviously not everyone thinks like that, but I do see that there can be some validity to what they were saying. Like, I think that some fans might unconsciously prefer the idea of their favorite idol being in a relationship with another male idol of the same group, rather than with some other girl that isn't them. I feel like we've been talking a lot about queer shippings, especially when it comes to male stars, but obviously it happens with female singers too. Jen Lisa and Che Lisa from Blackpink, Cameron from Fifth Harmony, and Solreen from Red Velvet are some of the biggest cases of queer shipping. Also, I want to take a moment to talk about that term, queer shipping. First of all, it sounds like a queer mail service, but hopefully by now you know what I mean. I haven't made up that word, but I saw someone online talking about how maybe it wasn't the most accurate term for the practice, because often the queer shipping is done by an audience of heterosexual girls. And that could be a whole other topic altogether, the role of heterosexual girls in the queer K-pop sphere. But anyways, it is kind of funny that it's like queer shipping but straight. Anyways, let me know what you think about that term. I'm still gonna be using it for the rest of the video because saying shipping idols of the same sex is just too long. And since we're talking about the straight female demographic in the queer K-pop sphere, I want to iterate that there is a line between the harmless shipping of idols and fetishizing and sexualizing queer relationships and individuals. In some of these MLM fanfictions written by straight women, for example, it can sometimes feel like that. And same with some of the boy love media. There are some implications when straight women create queer media, like MLM fanfiction for example. What I mean by that is that there can be some heteronormativity interwoven in queer media written by straight authors. A big way this manifests is by the whole who's the man and who's the woman in the relationship thing, which is just so gross to say. But sometimes in those fanfictions, they might assign roles to specific idols based on their stature or their personality or whatever. And the writers can sometimes play into some questionable stereotypical tropes to the point where it becomes a sort of pseudo-heterosexual relationship. But yeah, I just wanted to mention this because I'm sure that there is some well-written fanfiction that is innocent and harmless, but sometimes it can be kind of inadvertently damaging. Moreover, this kind of shipping can really take a toll on the friendship of the people that are shipped. For instance, Harry and Louis were really close at the start of Wendy's career. However, as Larry rumors began blowing up, they began distancing themselves from one another and the dynamics kind of became more awkward. Even Louis, when asked about Larry, Larry in 2015 said,
Can you tell me what your view is on these people who are obsessed by a Larry conspiracy?
I've never actually been asked about it directly. It's a funny thing. I mean, look, people can believe what they want to believe, but I just think it comes across sometimes a little bit disrespectful to the ones that I love. You know, like Eleanor. Sometimes it comes across a bit disrespectful, and it's like anything. I mean, like, you could genuinely, if you Google conspiracy on iPhones, right, you're gonna get a conspiracy. So I think it's one of these things that people just love to buy into, but in reality, obviously there's no truth to it, obviously.
and Zayn had something similar to say about the Larry rumors too. And I think that a similar distancing occurred between V and Jungkook too. I don't know, it kind of highlights how shipping at such a big scale can kind of be counterproductive. Like, obviously, if millions of people are analyzing your interactions with your friend, or even if you were actually in a relationship, I can imagine that that kind of scrutiny can for sure create a wedge. Before we finish this video, I want to specify that when I'm talking about shipping and the negative repercussions of shipping, I'm not talking about like platonic shipping or thinking that two people would be cute together. I think that that can be very harmless. I'm more so referring to the more extreme cases, but yeah, hopefully you've picked up on that by now. Finally, I can't make a video that talks about shipping in K-pop without including this video of Solar from Mamamoo reading comments on a live.
Now, please, bitches, don't comment about things you're not supposed to, such as shopping here. Please have some shame. Don't act as if it's funny. It may be funny for fans, but what would you feel if people you don't know did that with you and your close or best friend? Understand? Sorry, I don't understand.
Well, this is it for today's video. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this in the comments, and maybe subscribe if you'd like to see more videos this from me in the future. But anyways, thank you again, and hopefully we'll see each other next time. Bye!